Hi, everyone. I'm Lorraine Driscoll, and I'm the founder of Building Better Brains. And today we are going to be interviewing, or I'm going to be interviewing Lorraine Hudson, who is, is the term unschooler or deschooler, Lorraine?
Unschooler.
Okay,
Unschooler.
so Lorraine is an unschooler. And I know that probably for a lot of parents, when they even hear that word, they get triggered and be like, what? She's not teaching them anything? Um, and I thought it would be really cool to bring Lorraine on for a lot of reasons. I'm really curious about unschooling. I've heard only a bit about it. And I've just in the last week have learned more about it. And I'm kind of really interested in it. I think it's going to be something that can be a breath of fresh air for a lot of parents right now who feel like they have this responsibility to take on the role of a certified teacher and teach the curriculum and just try to cram as much information into their child's head that they're supposed to get at a certain grade level in the next couple of months. So I'm not going to go on anymore. Lorraine, I'm going to ask you to just tell us a little bit about yourself and your life, because it's really interesting. Go for it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. So my name is Lorraine. My husband, Jason, and I have 3 children who are currently 17, 14, and 11. None of them have ever been to school. We have been unschooling, from the very first moment. We live aboard a 47-foot catamaran, which we are originally from California. We sailed all the way down the California coast, all the way down the Pacific coast of Mexico, all the way through down to Panama, around the other side, up to Texas, and then around Florida. And we're currently in Maryland. We're expecting to hop the Atlantic in a year or two and relocate into Europe. We're kind of going slowly around the world to the right.
Cool. Very, very awesome. And you have how many children, Lorraine?
3. So Rowan is 17, about to turn 18. Kestrel's 14, and Aurora is 11.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I guess the first question is, what is unschooling?
So unschooling is a little bit of a paradigm shift, and I think it may have been easier for us to hit than it is for a lot of people. My husband and I are really funny. My high school was uber crazy competitive. My peers and I used to sit around in the library and talk about ulcer medication because we were like driven and crazy. And I was one of 12 valedictorians. Okay. It was like the crazy academic treadmill, and like one of them went on to be an astrophysicist, and one of them went on to be, just like these crazy high pressure people. My husband is the other end of that spectrum. He was in continuation school and dropped out and blah, blah, blah. And both of us, when we decided to become parents, figured that the system hadn't really served us well at all. Right. I had all of this crazy academic knowledge that I could apply to almost nothing.
Right.
And he had all of this relentlessly practical information that he could not use to climb. And it's like, okay, look, if I'm at one end of the spectrum, if I'm at the super succeeding end of the spectrum, and I think it was a failure, and you were at the super failure end of the thing, and you think it was a failure, we need another option. How are we going to do this? And we had friends in the sailing community, Frank and Ronnie Mayer, and they are super dedicated unschoolers. And I was whinging to Frank about this, and he was like, well, hey, have you considered this other option? Mm-hmm. And part of what helped is that his 2 daughters are amazing human beings. Like, they're the sort of kids that you meet them and you go, I would be happy if my children grew up to be like that. Right. How did you do that? Show me how that worked.
Yeah.
And so we just stepped on, and we've never looked back.
Super cool. Okay. So next question is, how does unschooling work? Or how does it work? What are you spending your day doing? What does that look like?
So our day, because of the boat schooling thing, our day is a little even weirder than most unschoolers, which is kind of saying something. But the whole thing is predicated on the idea that you do not teach, they learn. Okay. And it's a major paradigm shift because, especially with American schooling, traditional schooling, we have this very authoritarian view of the teacher teaches and the students absorb what the teacher teaches.
Yeah.
And all of us have had the experience of sitting in a classroom bored out of our skulls with this person yammering at us about stuff that doesn't matter, and we hang on to it. You know, we struggle to hang on to it long enough to regurgitate it in a test, and then poof, it's out of our heads.
Right.
What's the point of that? What is the point of that exercise? It's to teach you how to be bored. It's to teach you how to listen to an authority figure who may or may not be well informed in a thing. It's ridiculous. Unschooling flips that on its head and says, look, we are born curious. Anyone who has survived the why mommy, why mommy, why mommy, why phase of early childhood knows their curiosity is boundless. They are fascinated by everything. What happens if you never lose that? If they ask why and you tell them. The thing about unschooling that's hard is that you have to be prepared to drop everything at a moment's notice because of a why.
Right.
Why does this work? Well, it's really fascinating. Let me show you. Kind of a joke about how homeschoolers are always in the library.
Right.
It's true. I never know from one day to the next what is going to fascinate my children.
Right.
But it's incumbent upon me and my husband and my mother. We all pitch in at various times. Like we trade up, get into that more later. You've got to be prepared to just say, that fascinates you? Here are all the other resources you can use to explore this thing that fascinates you.
Right.
And what that does is that gives them the ability to find their own resources, the ability to learn how to learn, and it allows them to deep dive into any given topic that fascinates them.
Right.
So, it's kind of neat. And I know a lot of parents, like the first big red flag happens right after that speech, because I've given this speech a lot. The first big red flag is, well, if I let them, my kids would sit in front of the TV all day and watch videos.
Right. Yes,
they would. But you don't know what use they're making of that. There's a line from Shakespeare, Henry V, like, we his subjects have in wonder found marking what little use he made of his younger days. Like, you don't know what they're doing with their stuff. And my anecdote about that is my daughter, when she was 4, was watching YouTube videos of people playing video games. I'm pretty sure that we could not find a more useless use of time ever. Like, if you say that to a parent, they're like, what do you mean you're watching YouTube videos of someone playing a video game? Like, that's completely useless, without value, right? Like, any responsible parent would immediately say, too much screen time, go outside and play, right? Like, that's normal. So what happened was, one of the YouTubers she was watching pulled up a command line and coded in a change to the interface. A lot of people don't know that with Minecraft, there's a user interface and then there's also a command line, and you can get to the game either way. She's 4. She watched this YouTuber pull up a command line and she's like, oh my gosh, Mom, it's so much faster to just talk directly to the computer. I'm like, yeah, baby, it totally is. Do you want me to show you more of that? So we grabbed some books about how to code for Minecraft, and then we grabbed some books about Blue Jay, and then we did some books about Greenfoot, and now she's programming in Python. And my kids started being a programmer at that point. And that ties into another thing, which is a lot of people have read Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers. And it's about people who are wildly successful. The point there being, it takes roughly 10,000 hours to be really good at a thing. And 10,000 hours is roughly 10 years worth of effort. If your kid starts coding when they're 4 because they're fascinated by it, because it gets them where they want to go, because it's faster to talk to the computer directly, and they have had that spark all on their own. How, she's going to have her 10 years of programming experience now when she's 14. What a leg up is that, boom.
Exactly. Okay. Okay. So you're not, I guess my question, I think probably the question of a lot of people is, are you like, how do you teach your kid to read? Are you doing some explicit instruction?
You don't teach, they learn.
Right. So, okay.
There's evidence, there's actually a lot of science on this, that reading is actually a neurological phenomenon, not an educational phenomenon. It's fine motor control of eyeballs compared with a certain type of brain development.
Right.
Those things happen when the child is physiologically ready for them too.
Right. That's right.
Which is why when South Korea implemented a universal early reading program, their level of national myopia went to 95%.
Right.
And the push to read earlier and earlier is responsible for America's rise in myopia, because reading is a fine motor control. See the glasses? I read when I was 4 or 5, something like that.
Yeah.
And my eyes were like, we're not ready for this.
That's right.
What you do is they've discovered that when that gross physical development gets to the point where a child can read, they snap into reading at vocabulary level. So if you spend your time talking to them using large words, if you read to them all the time, if you always put the subtitles on movies they're watching, when they're ready, they snap in. And it's been that way for all 3 of my kids.
Okay. Okay. So then my next question is, what about math? Are you teaching math?
I love that question. I love that question because, again, that's another very school perspective, right? Yeah. You have to teach math as a discrete subject.
Yeah.
You don't. My middle child is very fascinated by mathematics, and I had him running through Khan Academy math, bored out of his skull. Like he's never been that resistant. And he's like, but I know I love the numbers. I know the numbers are magical, but I hate this. This sucks. So here I have a kid who's telling me he hates math, but the way he talks, he doesn't. He loves it. So I kicked him into philosophical math. If you go to TEDx, there are 1 million lectures by high-end theoretical mathematicians. And he was like, oh, this is what I wanted. Forcing him through algebra and geometry made him think he hated math. Kicking him ahead into listening to theoretical math, he was like, oh, this is amazing. And whoosh, there he went. Theoretical mathematics are not on any curriculum anywhere in America or Canada or anywhere else, because we think they have to do this other thing. And we're kind of crushing the genius out of a lot of kids. My kid in school would have thought he hated math.
Right.
But the other thing about the math thing that makes me nuts is mathematics are part of our practical lives, but we teach them as if it's a separate thing. My husband is a sailboat rigger for a living, which is all the stuff on the top of a sailboat that makes it go, the sails and the lines and the masts and the rigging and all of that. It's physics and geometry all day, every day. It's, how if the wind is blowing at this speed and the mast is this big and the boom is that big, how much sail can we have on to make the boat go forward and not break? And what diameter of lines carries what load, balance, and it's all of this crazy in your head math. But we don't teach it as math, we teach it as rigging.
Right.
So all of my kids can do geometry in their heads about force and flow and load and geometry and all the stuff that I don't know how to do.
Right.
Because those maths are part of their life.
Yes.
So that's how that works.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. So the question that I have, and I think a lot of people probably have, is how is all of this going to help your children kind of as adults to be able to kind of make their way, or whatever you want to say, in terms of careers and so forth? So
part of this, it's really interesting because a lot of parents believe that unless you go to college, you're a waste. And I get that in my face a lot.
I bet.
Which is, it's fascinating. Like, everybody knows that there's a lack of trades in America, but there's this very classist. You know, like everybody wants the plumber to be available, but nobody wants to pay the plumber what he's worth.
Right. Yep.
So there's that, which is a whole different issue. My oldest has 2 simultaneous trade apprenticeships going on right now. He is doing rigging and he's doing electrical.
Okay.
So he's training to be an electrician. He's trained to be a rigger. What's really interesting about the rigging one is that it's a crazy little niche profession that's only practiced by, you know, a very small number of people in the world. And you can actually emigrate to any nation in the world as a, I forget what the designation is. It's something like honored tradesman, because it's such a historical skill that literally any nation in the world will be like, oh, you know how to do that thing? Come on in.
Right.
Which is kind of a big deal. Yeah. And, you know, everybody needs electricians all the time. So I don't need to sell that one. But having said that, and that's the only child I have that's old enough to do the career thing, the question everybody actually really wants to know is about college.
Right.
The vast majority of colleges have a special admissions lane for unschoolers and homeschoolers, because they recognize that what has happened is, in the tremendous pressure of regular school and the regular admissions path, that children have lost their way. They've lost their spark. They've learned how to compete, but they haven't learned how to shine.
Right.
And so, for example, one of my friends who just finished a circumnavigation, they literally sailed from Seattle all the way around the planet and back again, put together a portfolio. Like, this is where we went. This is what we did. These were the life experiences we had. And her oldest son is in his 2nd year of college at this point, because the university was like, oh my gosh, like, what a unique thing. Let's bring that in.
Yeah.
But again, the thing about homeschooling is, and about college admissions, and this all ties together, so it's hard to explain this without connecting all the dots.
Yeah, for sure.
There are so many people who have been wildly successful as homeschoolers because they were homeschoolers, because they had the opportunity to shine in a way that maybe isn't that standard, you know, college path. Condoleezza Rice was a homeschooler. Venus and Serena Williams were homeschoolers. You know, everybody knows Tim Tebow, of course, because football. You know, the majority of the people who set our country up, the founders, were all homeschooled, because there wasn't public school at that point. You know, 4 of the U.S. Supreme Court judges, Sandra Day O'Connor was a homeschooler.
Okay.
Everybody has now heard of Billie Eilish, homeschooled because Hanson was homeschooled, and her parents said, oh, wow, Hanson had the time to be amazing musicians because homeschooled, let's do the same thing. And now, you know, Billie Eilish walks home with an armful of Grammys.
Yeah.
Had the time. If you look at clips of her and her brother in their bedroom doing their music, their mother has a neon 10,000 over the piano. It's like 10,000 hours thing, you know, you have it.
That's right. Yeah.
But I think the thing that's important about all those examples I just gave you is that those are completely different life paths. There's politicians and athletes and artists and musicians and writers and people doing the thing that they are best at. And the world is better off when more of us do the thing that we are best at.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's where we really fail with the, regular school system, is everybody learns everything, touches on everything. And if you're weak in something, we want to work really hard on that weakness, which you might never excel at in some ways. I hate saying that, but, instead of, like, it's that whole idea of why don't we learn what that child's strength is and allow that to flourish and let that genius come alive, right?
Right. Play to your strengths.
Yeah. So what you're saying then is that the whole unschooling thing does not mean you can't go to college or university, or if my daughter wants to become an astronaut, it doesn't mean that she can't become an astronaut. Is that what you're saying?
What it means is that she can get there so much faster if she is allowed to focus on the things that push her along that path.
Right.
The resources in this world for people who are motivated are everywhere,
Right.
and if she wants to be an astronaut, it's like, okay, there are NASA, it gives out classes and seminars and books and stuff constantly.
Right.
So like there's definitely ways to do it for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any advice that you would give parents right now who are kind of all being forced into what they're calling homeschooling? What would you tell them?
Oh my gosh, this is an amazing time because you have this opportunity to rebuild your relationship with your kid, and that's not going to happen if you're trying to rebuild that authoritarian school at home modality with them. It isn't going to work. Unschoolers have a holiday called Learn Nothing Day. And it's a day where we attempt to learn not a single thing. It's impossible. If you go through your life with your eyes even remotely open, you cannot get through a day without learning a thing. Right. And you're certainly not going to regress to stupid over, the length of however long this coronavirus thing lasts. This is such a great time to back away from the school thing. And the fear of them falling behind and the fear of them not succeeding. If you think about it, most parents want the best for their kids, and all of this fear and stress and everything is completely sourced in a desire for your kid to do their best. Imagine how much better they will do if you spend these weeks with them, encouraging them, supporting them, enjoying what they enjoy, really digging into what motivates them, figuring out where their fire is so that you can feed it.
Yeah.
Because most parents are running around, so like the parents are working, the kids are in school, you have no idea what your kid's passion is.
Right.
It's an opportunity to find it so that you can feed it.
Yeah, and that's something that really, going back to that authoritarian thing, that really seems to be coming to light the more that I'm learning about homeschooling compared to the regular school system is, I've mentioned this, I think, a dozen times in the last week about children in Amish families tend to have a better relationship with their adults and their parents. There isn't, and in communities like that, where there's homeschooling or unschooling or whatever you want to say, not the traditional method, there doesn't seem to be as much of that teenage rebellion that seems to be, that we almost seem to think is totally normal and almost like a milestone as in terms of growing up. And from what I'm understanding, it's because we're removing that kind of hierarchy of I'm the authority, you know nothing. And so it's only natural that there's going to be rebellion as a result. And I think also you're building that connection and that bond and so forth, right? Like it seems to be what I'm seeing in these communities.
Yep, absolutely. We haven't had any of that, teenagers with the eye roll thing. I mean, that whole idea is unique to cultures where there is a school environment. There's no school environment, that thing doesn't happen. And I think a lot of it is, just think of it for yourself. If you are interacting with someone who is fascinated by you, interested in you, telling you, encouraging you, you're going to want the relationship with that person. And if you're in a relationship with somebody where they're constantly telling you that you aren't working hard enough, you aren't good enough, you aren't smart enough, why don't you understand this thing? You're both breaking into tears over the nightly homework. Of course there's going to be, a fracture that doesn't need to be there. I personally think that strong families of whatever flavor, whether it's a family of choice or, however you choose to put it together, but human beings are meant to be in mutually supportive groups, and school does not encourage that.
No, I've really become aware of that, how school really creates an us versus them mentality, right? Between, like that whole peer group. And I mean, like anybody who's taught knows how, you have like a 30 or 25 grade 7s or grade 8s in a class, and it's the wrong combination. It's like a pack of wolves.
Right.
It can be an absolute nightmare. And I really think that it has to do with It's almost like too much of the same age, too much of the same age altogether. And yeah, it really, I'm really fascinated by it, because it really seems to be the missing piece that we're not aware of is, and that's something I'm hearing a lot from parents who've been reaching out to me in the last week and a half, is they're really stressed because they're like, my daughter isn't around, hasn't seen any of her peers, and this could go on for months and so forth. And a lot of these people do have siblings. Like, a lot of these people that have reached out to me have siblings, but to them, they need people their own age. And I get that. Like, it's definitely pleasant to socialize with people our own age, and especially at that age, because we're going through similar, possibly emotional experiences and so forth. But there seems to be almost an obsession that they can't socialize with someone who's a different age than them.
Yeah. So there's a really good book called Hold On to Your Kids by Gordon Neufeld and Gabriel Maté.
Okay.
And that book I want to say it's like 30 years old at this point. It came out of, I don't know if you recall or if you've read about, there was a period of time where there were all of these teenager on teenager murders.
Oh, right.
But Gordon Neufeld and Gabriel Maté are both Canadian. And this was actually more of a problem in Canada than the US, which, when does that happen?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where teenagers were ganging up on other teenagers and murdering them. Yeah. And there was a huge, groundswell of like, what is this?
Yeah.
And what Neufeld and Maté basically determined is that the human animal is not meant to be in huge same age groups, because we're used to having siblings. We're used to having extended families.
Yeah.
And there's always someone just a little bit older than you to look up towards for cues about proper behavior.
Yeah.
So, we look to our older siblings, we look to our parents, we look to our parents' parents. We look to the kids that are just a little bit older than us who have accomplished a thing when we want to learn to accomplish a thing. And that's sort of how human society has always worked. Except if you put a whole group of people together in a same age group, what happens is more of a Lord of the Flies sort of survival of the fittest thing, where the meanest, the most aggressive, the most sociopathic are the ones who rise to the top, and then everyone looks to them to form their behavior, which is a lot of what you see in the business community. Same deal.
Right. That's true too. Yeah. I was just thinking, like, every teacher can relate to that, where you have like the ringleader who just spins the class out of control. But it's true. It's not just in the classroom setting. It's also in the business setting or any kind of setting. That they kind of alpha, right? And
yeah. We're not meant to be in big same age groups. We're meant to have the shorthand joke for that in my family is it's time for the elephants. There was this study, and I don't know if it was actually true or not, where they were talking about in Africa, something had happened and a bunch of the older male elephants had died out, and there was a group of juvenile males, and they were like destroying crops and knocking over houses and just like rampaging.
Right.
And the conservation group actually airlifted an older, mature male elephant into the middle of this group of juveniles, and they chilled out because they had a mentor to look to who was like, no, we don't do that tromping on crops thing, And kind of our joke when we see a group of kids starting to behave badly is like, those guys need an elephant.
Right. Right.
Yeah. I get like, and we've trained our kids through years and years and years of attending school to look to their peers. And then we decry that, like, the Kardashian culture, like we encourage them to look to their peers and then we bag on them for having done so. And again, this is a fabulous opportunity to reconnect with your kids, reconnect as a family, and replace that sort of peer thing with a mutual respect interaction.
Yeah. And I think I think that's really interesting that you say that, because I feel like one of the things that parents are missing out on is that bond. And also the suicide rate is like insane, right? Like in Canada, it's insane. It's insane. Absolutely insane right now among teenagers. And I could talk all day about why I think, as both a nutritionist and an educational therapist, why there's reasons for that. But one reason that I really think could be a big factor that nobody's looking at on a social level is kids are not going to, there's such a us versus them mentality between the teens and the adults that what I have seen as a teacher, and I see even now my daughter in grade 6, is they just keep those adults out of their world. It could be, and I feel like my husband and I actually watched on Netflix the 13 Reasons Why, which was a show about teen suicide, right? And I kept saying to my husband, the big thing that stands out for me right here is these teens are constantly trying to solve crazy problems that even adults would struggle with, and they're trying to do it on their own, and they have no life experience, they have no resources.
Right.
And they're trying to help their friends who are suicidal, who have been raped, or who, are gay, or like want to kill someone. And it really is not just a Netflix Hollywood film. That's really what I see happening in our culture is kids are not turning to their elders for wisdom and insight and support.
That trust bond isn't there. Why would they turn to their elders if all their elders ever do is bag on them for not doing their chores and bag on them because their grades aren't good enough? Yeah. Why would you trust someone like that with such very important things to yourself? We're relatively new where our boat is, and that's part of the thing, right? Like we travel a lot, so my kids are constantly in a situation where they're making new social connections.
Right.
And my daughter has a bunch of school friends right now. So that's that 14-year-old girl, 11 to 14-year-old girl area. And I get some of the most shocking texts because her friends will say, I'm dealing with this thing. Mm-hmm. And my daughter will text me and go, Mom, what do I tell her? How do I walk her through this? Yeah. And I'm like, okay. Tell her this, now tell her that, now calm her down this way, now has she had a sandwich?
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because inevitably what happens next is the girls are like, what are you doing? And Aurora's like, I'm texting my mom. And they're like, oh my God, no! Like texting an adult is a breach of trust. And Aurora's like, no, it's cool, it's cool. And then, over time, we've built trust with our kids' friends. But we have kids showing up here who have broken up with a boyfriend and their parents don't even know they were dating. But they come to us when their hearts are broken and, we put them together and who come to us with these huge things they're facing in their life that they don't feel they can trust their parents with because their parents don't ever sit and listen to them because the pressure to achieve, the pressure to succeed, the pressure to has completely destroyed the bond of trust between the parent and the child. And it's horrible.
Yeah. So there's a question for you. Whether people are temporarily homeschooling or whether, let's say, school starts back, God knows when, do you have any advice for parents in terms of what they can do to build that trust, to avoid that us versus them mentality and that separation of teen versus adult?
Sure. It's hard. It's super hard. It involves a paradigm shift.
Right.
It involves letting go of the idea that you are the authority. One of the other things that I like to tell new homeschoolers is look, I get that you want your kid to succeed. I get that you want them to have an excellent, employment. I get that you want them to make money when they grow up. You don't know what the world's going to look like that they grow into. The job that I have did not exist when I was in school.
Yeah, exactly.
The things that my kids do for money don't exist now. I can't train them to be a whatever because I don't know what the world is going to look like in another 10 years. None of us knew this coronavirus thing was going to happen, right? You have to be comfortable with letting go of that authoritarian thing and just saying hey, I don't know the answer to that question. Let's go find out together.
Yeah, exactly.
So getting away from always having to have the answers. That's terrible pressure to put on a parent too. So here we go. I give everyone permission to not have the answers.
Right.
So like, hey, I don't know, let's Google that.
Yeah.
You know, so there's that. It's really common for adults to bag on children's interests. You know, I opened this interview with the discussion of my daughter was watching YouTube videos of somebody else playing a video game.
Right.
Immediately when I tell parents that story in real life, they roll their eyes. There is
Right.
always an eye roll when I say that.
Yeah.
When was the last time you actually sat down with your kid and watched them do the things they love?
Yeah.
Watch, like, really figure out what's going on there and why they're doing it and why they love it. And you don't have to love it, but you have to love that they love it.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
And what's fascinating is the more you do that, the more they become interested in showing you things. Oh gosh, I forget who said it, but there's a quote that goes around mommy groups that's something like, if they can't trust you with the little things, how do you expect them to trust you with the big things later?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you don't like, you want them to come to you if they're thinking about suicide or, you know, a friend has been raped or whatever. You want them to come to you. But when they came to you to show you that they were watching this cool thing on YouTube, you blew them off. Yes. And those years and years and years of blowing them off, those stack up into a picture in their head of you not caring about them and what matters to them. And they, because like their forebrains are not developed yet, like that's a biological thing. Remind me, I want to cycle back to that in a second. Their brains are not developed, so they don't know the difference between showing you this YouTube video that they really love and telling you about their friend who's in trouble.
Right.
To them, that's the same level of importance.
Yeah.
You know, so this is your time to say, look, you don't have work pressure, you don't have, you know, you're at home, like you are quarantined. You have all the time in the world to figure out what matters to them and make yourself be part of that life.
Yeah. You're going to talk about the forebrain.
Oh, the forebrain thing. So that's another thing I really, really, really am recommending that parents do during this time. Let your teenagers sleep.
Right.
So biologically, you know, their forebrains are developing. Their brains are growing faster now than they did when they were infants. Yeah. Right. And that forebrain development is what gives them the ability to make good decisions later on. You know, the ability to project into the future, the ability to value judge, all of that is out of the forebrain. And that develops while they sleep, which is why teenagers are famous for sleeping for so long. But the school system makes them, it also biologically shifts their clock. Teenagers naturally sleep in later and stay up later. And there's nothing you can do about that. That's biological. This is such a great opportunity to let your teenagers catch up on the sleep they need. The more you let them sleep in the hours they want to sleep, the nicer they are as human beings.
Right. Yeah.
Because their biological needs have been met. You know, if you keep someone hungry all the time, they're cranky. If you keep someone sleep deprived all the time, they become horrible people. If you take this opportunity to let your teenagers sleep, their forebrains will develop and they will become nicer people.
Yeah. 100%. And like, I think there's that difference, right? Where we're not talking your teenagers up till 2 a.m. playing video games, you know, and so forth, that, you know, it's one thing for them to be playing video games, but not, you know, like a marathon of like 8 hours a day. Yeah, that might affect their sleep for different reasons. But yeah, there's so much research on the importance of sleep for teenagers, like you said, that it's critical. So yeah, but they're not necessarily being lazy.
They're not. And I know so many parents right now who are struggling with, you know, do I keep them on schedule or not?
Yeah.
Like take the opportunity to throw the schedule out the window.
Yeah.
Because there's never going to be a better time to do it right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to hit real quick on that if I let them thing.
Okay.
Because that's part of deschooling as well. I know so many parents, because I don't believe in, you know, screen time as a thing. Like my kids read books, they talk to their friends, they, you know, they do amazing stuff. I mean, technology is an amazing tool if used, you know, used properly.
Yeah.
And I work in technology. So my kids have, you know, tech has been part of their world. It's been ubiquitous, you know, from birth. I fight the fight all the time with parents who are like, you know, you need to limit screen time. Like screen time is some sort of giant evil thing. And the one thing I would say to those parents is the split second what you are doing is more interesting than what is on the screen, your kids will drop the screen and come with you.
Right. Yeah.
It never fails. You know, if I'm like, hey, let's go kayaking. Hey, let's go sail. Hey, let's go hike. Hey, let's go, you know, I'm heading to the museum. Anyone want to come with me? Immediately they'll be like, oh yeah, let's go, you know.
Yeah.
The problem with kids who are wanting to veg out in front of the screen is that in a hostile school environment, in a hostile education environment where they're not getting enough sleep and their brains are under stress, of course they're going to want to flop out and veg and just recuperate. It doesn't hurt to let that happen for a while. But then you need to create a life that's more interesting than the life on the screen.
Right.
And as soon as you do that, they're on it.
Yeah.
So allow that magic to happen too.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That's yeah. Is there anything else, Lorraine, that you want to add in before we close?
You gave me some notes, and I'm zooming through just to make sure I didn't miss anything. Super quick. How are parents who are working managing homeschool?
Right. Yes. Thank you.
I've worked from home. I've telecommuted for literally the last 30 years.
Right.
With my kids at home, homeschooling. And what's glorious about parents who work and homeschooling is that they are more integrated with your work environment. Yes. And that is the best job training ever. I actually outsource some of my work to my daughter because she can do it, because she's grown up, you know, sitting on the bed next to me, watching me do my thing. And like I said, my oldest son is in a rigor apprenticeship. He's grown up watching his dad work, going to work with his dad, whatever. There's such value to having them integrated in your life, because as much as you don't understand what happens to them in the school day, they don't understand what happens to you in the work day. The thing about this time is that it gives you both an opportunity to integrate with each other's worlds a little bit better and understand each other a little bit better. I can tell my kids, you know, I'm having a lousy day at work and I'm going to be a stress puppy. And when I shut down my computer for the day, they're like understanding, like, how are you doing? Like, what happened? Like, do you need a cup of tea? Like, you know, because they know, because they're right here, because they can hear it go down, as opposed to me coming home and being, you know, Godzilla and them not knowing where it came from.
Exactly.
Any opportunity you have to let them into your life and to let them into, you know, you into their life. And this is such a great time for that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I see that with my own daughter, where when I started working from home with my business, even just the beauty of them learning your trade. Like, my daughter knows so much about the brain and so much about nutrition and how we learn and so forth.
Right.
Just by absorbing it from being around me. And I'm not sitting there explicitly giving her lessons on this stuff, right?
Right.
Or she'll like remark that, I don't know, something about somebody else because she's picked it up from me. So yeah, it's like that kind of, like you said, they naturally learn, right?
They naturally learn, and they're interested because they see you doing it and they see you being engaged and they trust you. So they want to see what you're up to. Like I said, I'm in technology, and the vast majority of people in my workplace are not people who went to college to do the thing I do.
Right.
Like most of us learned by doing. So that's a very normal thing, which is another thing I wanted to kind of help people get away from, that whole college is the only path to success thing.
Yes, 100%.
Like, sometimes just really engaging with your kids, showing them what you do, having them be involved in your stuff is some of the best career preparation there could possibly be.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Lorraine. This has been so interesting and really insightful. So great time.
All right. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.